Donnie and Dolly. The team is supported by ableauctions.ca. Closing your business? We can help.
All of today's guests are brought to you. Good job, Brian. You want to put my microphone up, or are you still mad at me about the argument we had yesterday?
About AI.
About AI. Thomas Drance standing by. Brought to you by the Bayside Oceanfront Resort. Dive into West Coast luxury with oceanfront rooms, a seaside restaurant, and relax in their indoor and outdoor pools with free parking, on-site cafe, fitness center, and so much more. Your ultimate escape awaits. Book your stay. Call 250-248-8333 or visit us at BaysideResortParksville.com. Delaney's OK Tire and Langley inbox just before we get to Thomas. This is from Chris. I'm a big reader, and the Agassi book open. Yes, it's one of my faves for sure. Wow. Once you read the first page, you're hooked as it describes how intense his father was in training a young Andre. I'm gonna have to buy that. Maybe you should next time you go into a bookstore, don't get upset. Go because there's nothing there you like. Go and buy Andre Agassi's book.
I go to bookstores once, probably a month, Donnie. Go hunting for a book. And last time I went, I couldn't find anything.
Dan Russell's book is
it'll be a cold day in hell before I read that. And when I write my book, he's going to be in it too, and he's not going to like it.
Okay, as we bring in Thomas Drance from The Athletic, Canucks and Oilers tonight at Rogers Arena. How are you, sir? Oh, my gosh.
Just finishing up Dan Russell's book.
Yeah. I think it's page 65 where he rips into Dolly. Well, look at behind you. Oh. Is that just for show? Have you read all those books? Or are you going to read all those books?
You've read them all.
I mean, I've read them all. Yeah, I've got a couple sports books sections. I need to get the new Ed Willis to throw up there.
Yes. Never boring.
But basically, I've got every Canucks book ever written, basically, with the exception of Willis's, and that's simply because I haven't had the time yet to do my monthly trip to the bookstore with Rick. And then, I know I've got reference books, I've got PR books, I've got all sorts of stuff, and almost all of them have Ben's on the back. I don't know that there's many. Unless I rebought it because the book was too dog-eared that I haven't gotten to yet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you have a favorite?
I've got many leather-bound books, gentlemen. Smell like rich wine.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite in the sports category? Yeah.
Oh, in the sports category or the Canucks specific sports category? What was the gentleman's name? Donnie.
Dan Russell?
Denny. Denny was his first name.
Denny Boyd?
1970s.
Denny Boyd. Yes.
Danny Boyd wrote 2 books about Vancouver Canucks history in the mid 70s. So a lot of it sort of dating all the way back to the Millionaires and the process of getting the team and on and on. And man, that guy could write. Turn a great phrase. Encountering those in my early 20s was a huge influence on me. So Denny Boyd, I'm going to shout out. He's got a 2-part Vancouver Canucks history from 6 years into the history of the franchise. Brilliant. Great reads.
Yeah, I love how you asked me that question. Anything old in Vancouver? Hey, Donnie, do you remember this guy? And I got it.
Do you remember this guy you came up with?
Yeah. yeah. You should check out Captain George Vancouver's biography. It's amazing. Hey, what for people who aren't sure, what decisions do the Canucks still have to make going into tonight's game?
So, look, they have a variety of them, obviously. I'm down to 25 sort of guys on the roster that are fully healthy, right? If we don't count Dakota Joshua and Thatcher Demko out indefinitely. And then, obviously, Pius Suter and Akito Hirose banged up from late in the preseason, and their status is up in the air, too. That brings us down to 23. From what I understand, those injuries to Hirose and Pius Suter make it very likely that the Canucks will not be able to open the season avoiding LTI, which was their plan A, right? So this team structured a lot of what they wanted to do this offseason to avoid placing Tucker Pullman's $2.5 million on LTI, which would allow them to toll daily space with an eye toward, making in-season moves aggressively as Jim Rutherford and Patrick Alvin did so ably last season. It's looking like, based on what I'm hearing, the club will not be able to avoid LTI. Now, there are drawbacks to that, of course, right? But there are also advantages. And one of the advantages is you can enter the season most likely with more bodies on your roster, because you can exceed that $88 million upper limit of the salary cap by whatever you're able to capture of Pullman's $2.5 million. So if not for the Suter and Akito Hirose injuries, we'd be looking at this and saying, okay, they can probably carry one of Friedman or Juleson on the roster to open the year, and one of Baines, Neil Zaman, and Atu Ratu on the roster to open the year. But with the team likely to require LTI, at least to start with, that becomes different. Right now, you can carry a full 23 men if you want to, with Demko and Dakota Joshua on normal IR and with Pullman on LTI. That's where things are trending right now. So still have some decisions, still some roster spots to fight for this evening at Rogers Arena. You can imagine that Rick Tocchet will weigh the performance, the pressure performance from those players pretty heavily in making his final decisions. But the club might have more wiggle room in terms of carrying more players into opening night than we expected, based on sort of how the run out has gone down over the last week.
Thomas, they did not want to lose Patera on waivers to the Boston Bruins. It's really left them in a bind. It's really left them in a bind in Abbotsford. They had a beer league goalie at training camp yesterday as the fourth goaltender. Talk a little bit about what they do now for that, because they got Tolopilo down in Abbotsford, but who's the backup? I mean, what's going on with them losing Patera?
Yeah, so you've got Ty Young, who could, he's old enough now, he could play American League hockey, but you probably want him getting more games than just sitting with a ball cap. You've got Jonathan Lemieux on a minor league contract, so that would be the other option. But that's kind of it. And, the concern for me about the Patera loss, especially given that we still don't have a Demko timeline and it's not as if he's practicing with the team, right? My rule of thumb for a player dealing with a long-term injury is once they're back to practicing with the team, you start the clock and assume you're a week to 10 days out. So at this point, right, I mean, the Canucks will have played 3 games in 10 days. 10 days from now, the Canucks will have played 3 regular season games, and Demko's not practicing yet. I think we should reasonably be looking at that and saying, okay, not only is he probably not ready for opening night, but it's probably going to be a bit beyond that, just based off of that sort of rough way of looking at things. Okay, so that leaves you with Shilovs and Lankinen in net. That's fine. I think that's a totally fine outcome for this team from a goalie depth perspective in Demko's absence. But you're one injury away in net, one more injury away in net from calling up a goaltender like Tolopilo, who's never played an NHL game. And that would leave you with very little AHL experience, too, from an Abbotsford perspective. So, yeah, I mean, this team does need that sort of quote-unquote third goaltender who's played some NHL games, who's got some NHL reps under their belt, from the perspective of, what the Abbotsford Canucks need for sure, but also the depth that this Vancouver Canucks team requires. There are options to address this. Waivers probably aren't one of them, right? Of course, Patera could always hit waivers again, right? Especially if the Bruins can come to terms with Swayman. Canucks would have first priority to reclaim him. I wonder if that's sort of the route here, the preferred one. Although that requires, a few things to occur that are outside this team's control. And outside of that, you're sort of looking at trades. You're looking at, making some sort of tricky maneuvers to try and flesh out your goaltending depth in Demko's absence. I don't see it as just an Abbotsford Canucks story, though, Rick, right? Like, this is about an appropriate level of NHL depth, especially because at this point, I think we're feeling pretty confident that Demko's not going to be ready for game 1, maybe not game 2, maybe not game 3 of the regular season.
Yeah, well, it could be a while. The other one for you, Thomas, I want to look at that third pair defense, Forbort and Desharnais. There's some concern, the concern there about, 2 new guys fitting in the whole 9 yards. What are you seeing with that third pair right now?
Yeah, look, I think it's fair to wonder if the Canucks are going to be able to manufacture enough offense when Hughes and Hronek get a breather as a pair, right? Because we saw with Myers and Soucy, they did such a great job as a lockdown, shutdown pair in the postseason, and yet the Canucks were generating something like 10 shots per hour with them on the ice as the playoffs went along. This team struggled to generate shots, and a lot of those struggles came with the fact that while, Soucy and Myers as a pair were excellent defensively. The team struggled to maintain possession in those minutes, and it feels like Forbert Desharnais might have a similar profile, right? Two big guys, really good defensively. You know you're going to block some shots. You know you're going to be tough to play against from the perspective of opposing skilled forwards trying to get into the guts of the ice. But can you key the rush the other way? Can you get attacking with that pair on the ice? So for me, it's not just a third pair issue. It's sort of a bottom four issue. Can this team manufacture the sort of offense that they need to, right? If they're going to be a contending team, if they're going to be an elite team, it's not about leveling up defensively necessarily. This team was already really, really good at that, high end even. It's about leveling up in terms of what you generate. Is the bottom four built to enable that sort of rush attacking style that Tocchet has emphasized since training camp opened? I think that's a big question here for sure. And then, of course, the other one going into the last preseason game is Friedman or Juleson, or maybe both if Pullman's going on LTI. Still a lot to sort out in terms of what lies beneath the bottom six as well.
Okay, off to the bookstore you go and buy Ed Willis's book. Never boring.
Get it done.
Much like yourself.
Get it done.
Thank you, gentlemen. Cheers.